Niseme asante kwa wewe na wote ambao siku zote tunakuwa hapa Double Updates. Mimi natumai unaendelea vizuri kabisa. Niite Mr. WJ na kama kawaida hii hapa ni ulimwengu wa siasa. Wengi sasa hivi wanamhitaji na wanamuulizia kinara wa chama cha ODM, namzungumzia Raila Amolo Odinga. Na sababu kubwa ambayo inafanya watu kumtafuta Raila Odinga ni kutokana na vitu vingi sana ambavyo tunavihitaji, lakini havikuji hivyo kirahisi kulingana na vitu vinavyoendelea, lakini vitakuja tu kama serikali hii hapa ya William Samoei Ruto, Kenya Kwanza, Rigathi Gachagua itasukumwa. Sasa hapo tayari umeelewa ninachokizungumzia, kwamba Raila Odinga ndo mtu pekee ambaye ana uwezo wa kuisukuma kabisa serikali hii hapa, kiasi cha kwamba tunaweza tukaizungumzia tena, au tunaweza tukawaona serikali wakishughulikia swala la IEBC na commissioners ambao wataiongoza uchaguzi wa mwaka 2027. Bila shaka inaonyesha kabisa hatuna mtu bado ambaye tunaweza tukamtegemea leo hii, au tunaweza kusema kwamba okay, sawa Kalonzo, tuna vitu vingi sana ambavyo tunatakiwa kuangalia, tunatakiwa kutafuta. Kwa mfano tume ambayo inasimamia masuala ya uchaguzi, that's IEBC, lakini ndio hivyo, serikali wanalegea sana, serikali inajivuta sana. So wewe unaweza kufanya kitu, haiwezekani. So mwisho siku watu wanamuulizia Raila Odinga kwa sababu wanaweza wakafanya hivyo. Ni muda unasonga naweza nikasema, lakini pia tuna hesabu miaka kama 3 hivi toko tunafika mwaka 2026 27, and unaelewa uchaguzi ulivyokuwa nyuma. So inabidi watu waanze kujipanga mapema sana, mtazamaji. And haya yote yasipoangaliwa, then inamaanisha kuna vitu vingi sana ambavyo tutafail. Yani watu wanatakiwa kujipanga as early as now, and I don't know the reason why hawa watu wanajivuta. In fact watajivuta zaidi kwa sababu unajua the more wanaendelea kupigana like Rigathi nani na Kenya Kwanza sa team, then kuna vitu vingi sana ambavyo haviendelei kwa sababu watu wana concentrate kwenye kupigana, kutupiana maneno, hakuna muda wa kufanya kazi. Kwa hiyo unakuta kwamba vitu vinajivuta sana, kuna shughuli ambazo zinaendelea, na hivi ni vitu ambavyo ni vya muhimu sana. Kama tume ambayo inasimamia masuala ya uchaguzi ya IEBC, ni mambo ambayo tunatakiwa kuyasolve na mapema, ili bwana tukifika 26 27 watu tuwe tayari, tujue kina nani ndo kabisa watakuwa wanatuongoza kwenye shughuli ya uchaguzi. Lakini I think nataka nikupe nafasi uitazame video fulani hapa ambayo inamuonyesha seneta wa Busia Okiya Omtata akizungumzia swala la hawa watu ambao wanatakiwa kutuwakilisha wakati wa uchaguzi, au watu ambao wanatakiwa kuisimamia uchaguzi. And kuna mambo mengi mapya ambayo anayazungumza, nina uhakika wengi wenu hamfahamu. Lakini tukimalizia video yake tutaizungumzia kidogo tour yake Uhuru Kenyatta kule South Africa. South Africa masuala ya uchaguzi inaendelea na ni ya moto kweli kweli, and Uhuru anakuwa miongoni mwa watu ambao waliteuliwa na I think Africa Union, yes, kwenda kuwa kama observers wa uchaguzi, and amekuwa akifanya mikutano kadha wa kadha. So tuione kwanza video ya Omtata, alafu tukirejea tutaiona ya Uhuru Kenyatta akiwa South Africa.
Senator Okoiti Andrew Omtata.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to conditionally support the motion because we need an IEBC in place, whether it comes through the window or through the front door. We need an IEBC in place so that we can discharge the constitutional timelines that are some have been infringed, as Senator Omar has observed, in terms of by-elections for MPs and for wards, members of the county assemblies. But that being as it may, and I support the bill only because of that we should have it in place. But in the bigger equation, or in the final, when I do a proper analysis of this bill, I see that we are again going to fail. the IEBC we are going to have is going to be a failure because, and you'll not be alone, because you have seen all our independent commissions have failed in their mandate because we appointed them through ad hoc committees. There is no way an ad hoc committee can produce an independent body. I've never seen it anywhere. I've tried to research across the world. It's only in Kenya that we are trying to achieve the impossible by thinking that we can get an independent organ produced through an ad hoc committee. The issue of commissioners, we need to look at the best practices elsewhere. We cannot assume that we are going to invent the wheel in Kenya. All the democracies across the world, when you look at them, electoral officials are chosen by political parties. The people with a fight, the people who are contesting for power, are the ones who choose people who can sit there and represent their interests and let the contestants checkmate. But to talk of an ad hoc committee doing that, it's impossible. You get something like on the selection panel, religious leaders. What dog do they have in the fight for electoral seats? Civil society, and all these other groups. So I'm seeing this thing primed for failure. We should think of the IPPG way that we succeeded in this country, that gave us a successful referenda and gave us a successful 2002 elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, the question of the National Assembly trying to assume that it is Parliament and the Senate does not exist is a very, very serious issue. And I agree with your submissions when you're on this side, that wherever the word National Assembly appears, it should be replaced with the word Parliament. But better still, it could be replaced with the expression National Assembly and the Senate. There's no way an election can be handled through a law made only by the National Assembly. The wards are affected, the Senate itself is affected, we are elected through this law. It cannot be by the National Assembly alone. They are not our lords. So the Senate must be included, and I would rather be more definitive than what was proposed to use the word Parliament. We have the word National Assembly and the Senate. That is what makes Parliament. Parliament is not made of the National Assembly. In fact, it's a misnomer to refer to members of the National Assembly as the members of as MPs. We are also MPs. Senators are MPs, are members of Parliament. As regards the concerns that Senator Cherargei raised, that if the chairman, Mr. Chebukati, had been kidnapped, what would have happened? That something with a loophole would have come across to allow that. I think the question of bringing the presidential election to Bomas is unconstitutional. There is no provision in the Constitution for having a tallying center at Bomas. If you look at Article 138, Clause 2, it is very clear that the election takes place in each constituency, the election for president. We should have results for each constituency. We should know who has won in each of the 290 constituencies, and then we just get an aggregation. And the people to announce the winners in each constituency are the returning officers. Article 89 is very clear on how to conduct elections. So the idea that you have got a chief, I think the returning officer for the presidential election, is anathema to the provisions of Article 138, Clause 2, and Article 89 of the Constitution. So I hope that we shall have the fidelity to Chapter 7 of the Constitution and begin implementing elections as prescribed in Article 87, in Chapter 7. Even under Article 140 of the Constitution, where you have got dispute of presidential elections, where a petition is given 7 days and the court is given 14 days, I have seen people trying to say that the timeline is very short. Even judges of the Supreme Court have claimed it is very short. But the problem is that they are stuck in brick and mortar. They are thinking of manual elections. But if we are doing digital elections, 14 days are just too long. And I would also want to point out that in Raila 1, the first petition Raila filed, a question came up whether spoiled ballots count or not. Show me where in the Constitution you have got spoiled ballots. You only have spoiled ballots when you have a manual election. But because the Constitution anticipates at fully digital election, there are no spoiled ballots anywhere. So the spoiled ballots become a creation of the Supreme Court, and it's part of how the courts have been mutilating the Constitution through interpretations not anchored in law or fact. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's also the issue that people are talking of the two-gender rule, two-thirds gender rule. I've read the Constitution of Kenya over and over. I've never come across the expression two-thirds gender rule. There's a two-thirds gender principle in Article 87, in Article 27, Clause 8, and in Article 81. So, again, it is the Supreme Court which invents this word gender rule. In the advisory that the Attorney General sought whether what he called the gender rule would apply in 2013 or would apply later. So there's nothing like a gender rule. A rule must be observed. What is in the Constitution is a gender principle, something that we must work towards. There's no obligation that you must implement a principle in this time and space. My friends had asked me to cut my submission short. So the Senator for Kiambu would also like to contribute to the bill. I'll be magnanimous, and I'll stop my submissions there. I had a long list of things to address.
Tata, the Honorable Senator Karungu Tango has not made that request. I cannot see that he wants to speak.
Oh, he wants to reply. I think he wants to reply. They want to reply. So I'll terminate my submissions at that stage so that I can allow them to reply. I can see it's almost time. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the bill, but I know it's going to be another disaster when implemented, but it will enable us to overcome a constitutional conundrum that is cascading towards us, in the form of constitutional timelines that require the IEBC to do certain things, including the review of boundaries. With those few remarks, I support Mr. Speaker, sir.
So mambo ni kama hayo, lakini before nikuonyeshe video ya Uhuru Kenyatta, mimi nina kitu kimoja tu ambacho naweza nikazungumza kuhusu Uhuru Kenyatta kuwa kama miongoni mwa watu ambao wanafuatilia uchaguzi wa kule South Africa, na sio kufuatilia tu, wameteuliwa na kuchaguliwa kama watu ambao ndo kabisa watakuwa wanaifuatilia, kuiangalia na mambo kama hayo. Mtazamaji wangu, huyu ni mtu ambaye unaweza ukaona hata waliomchagua waliangalia nini, kwa sababu sio swala la kuchukua tu mtu yeyote, you understand. And tayari hapa inakuonyesha hata kilichotokea mwaka 2022. Uhuru alikuwa miongoni mwa watu ambao hawakutaka maneno mengi. So alipoiacha hivyo, as much as watu wengine watasema ungewacha, ungefanya nini, lakini kwake yeye ilimjenga. Si tu kwamba Ruto alipata, lakini ilimjenga kwa sababu hakukwamilia au hakumpea mtu ambaye alikuwa mtu wa kwake au mtu ambaye alikuwa na ukaribu naye na vitu kama hivyo. Unajua, mostly kama ingekuwa watu wengine then hawangekubali, but alikuwa na uwezo wa kuzuia isiende ilipoenda. Lakini sasa ndio hivyo akaonyesha wanaume sasa, umeelewa? Yani mtu ambaye hataki maneno na watu, nadhani pia ikamtengenezea sana profile yake, na mwisho siku hawa watu wakamchagua, wakaona kwamba okay, there is nothing wrong tukimchukua mtu kama huyu hapa, kulingana na pia historia yake, atufanyie kazi. So acha nikupe nafasi uitazame video alivyofanya kule South Africa Uhuru Kenyatta, lakini ukimaliza subscribe ili uendelee kupata taarifa nyingi na mpya kila wakati. Bye bye.
Observations. The first of these is that the 2024 elections are anticipated to be the most contested in the last 30 years, reflecting a very competitive environment. Secondly, that the election has been highly litigated, but we have noted and are pleased to state that the cases have been dispensed with expeditiously, and even though the outcomes were received with mixed feelings, they did not generate any disruptive reactions. Thirdly, there is significant public scrutiny regarding the transparency and fairness of the electoral process, and there are heightened expectations for accountability from all stakeholders. A number of issues, key issues that we think need for us to pay attention to. The first of these is the general security, potential protests, special monitoring of political party conduct and speeches. The next is voters who are unable to identify their voting stations due to the amendment of the Form 24 versus limited education.
Good afternoon. The Commission reports a smooth start to national and provincial elections for 2024. By 7 o'clock, 93% of our network of 23,292 voting stations were reported open, both physically and online. The remainder of the voting stations at which we were delayed opened within the hour. We also unfortunately report that there were a number of voting stations at which we opened late, owing to delays on our material handling, also related to issues of escort where there were not enough security services to escort our material, including protest in certain communities. In most stations, queues had already formed before the stations were meant to open at 7. This, we think, is testament to the enthusiasm of South Africans to record their political choice. The Commission respects its obligation to ensure that each of the 27 million registered voters will receive an opportunity to record that choice before voting closes this evening. At 12 o'clock, the election operations around the country were reported to have been in good progress with minimal incidences that we are dealing with. Some of the incidences that we had to deal with are the following: late delivery of ballot papers, mostly in the city of Johannesburg and Region 3, which is the Sandton, Dunkeld, and Heidi Park area, as well as the Rudoport area, because of departure to the strict instruction of delivery. People were being innovative, and in the process, they delayed the supply of voting materials to those stations. In the Eastern Cape, we had 5 voting stations that were not opened owing to community protest. Again, there we have confirmation that working with the South African Police Department, the voting stations are now open. There were 2 in Ntabankulu, 1 in Winnie Mandela, 1 in Port St. John's, and 1 in Enyandeni. Similarly, there were 20 voting stations at which we opened beyond 9 o'clock in the area of eThekwini, as well as in Umzi Wabantu, where owing to community protest, the station could not open, even though our staff were ready and able to administer the electoral project. The Commission assures voters that adequate supplies of all material, including 90 million ballot papers for all the 3 ballot types, are available, and every voter will be assisted to vote before voting stations close. We use this opportunity to remind voters of the following. 1, that they may only vote at a voting station at which they are registered, unless they had by the 17th of May given pre-notification to the Independent Electoral Commission to indicate the station at which they will vote, and to do so and present at that station today on the 29th of May. That said, a voter who had given pre-notification to vote elsewhere but finds themselves at their voting district, that voter will be allowed to vote at that voting station, and they will be entitled to receive all their 3 ballots. The Commission also confirms that voting kicked off at various correctional facilities across the country to enable inmates who are registered and incarcerated an opportunity to cast a vote, and in fulfillment of Section 24B of the Electoral Commission Act.